A single father with grease under his fingernails, a corporate lawyer in a $1,000 coat, and one sealed letter that could stop a $50 million deal in its tracks. When Owen Brecker walked into the offices of Carrington Ridgemont Financial with his 8-year-old son, and a document nobody in that building wanted to see, he had maybe 3 minutes before security would escort him back out into the February cold. What the boardroom didn't know was that the man they were about to humiliate had the legal standing to freeze every asset they owned. The automatic doors of Carrington Ridgemont's downtown Toronto office opened with a soft hiss. Owen stepped through with Aiden tucked close against his left side, the boy's mittens still damp from the walk, from the parking garage 2 blocks over. The lobby was the kind of place that made you feel the full weight of what you didn't have. Polished limestone floors, a reception desk that stretched halfway across the room like a judge's bench, a waterfall feature along the far wall that served no function except to say, "We have enough money to let water fall." Aiden pressed his face against Owen's jacket and whispered, "It's like a hotel." "Fancier," Owen said. His own voice sounded wrong in there. Too flat, too much like someone who fixed transmissions and poured his own coffee, and owned exactly one dress shirt that still fit him properly. He crossed toward the reception desk. The woman behind it had the kind of stillness that came from years of making uninvited people feel like they'd come to the wrong floor. Her eyes tracked from Owen's face down to the envelope tucked under his arm and then back up. "Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I need to speak to Renata Holloway." A small pause. A professional kind of pause. "Mrs. Holloway is in a scheduled meeting this afternoon. She doesn't accept walk-ins, sir. If you'd like to book through our client services line." "I'm not a client." Owen set the envelope on the counter, not aggressively, just clearly. "I'm a co-executor of the Brecker Estate Trust. My name is Owen Brecker. Ms. Holloway is 40 minutes away from signing a transfer of property worth $52 million that she is not legally authorized to complete without my signature." The receptionist's expression didn't break, exactly. It shifted. A tightening around the eyes, something recalibrating. "I'll need to contact our legal department." "While you're doing that," Owen said, "you might want to let someone upstairs know that if that transfer executes before I speak to Ms. Holloway, the bank account it hits will be frozen within the hour." He wasn't bluffing. He'd spent the last 4 days making sure of it. The woman picked up her phone, spoke in low, carefully arranged sentences. Aiden, who had been silent the whole time, slid his hand into Owen's and looked up at him. "Are they going to call the police again?" Owen looked down. The boy's eyes were steady. Aiden had been 8 years old the first time he'd watched his father get stopped by security in a parking lot because someone had decided a man in a work jacket didn't belong in a place like that. That had been 2 years ago, outside the estate lawyer's office in Oakville. Aiden had been 6 then and had cried in the car for 40 minutes. He was older now. He'd stopped crying about things like that. Owen wasn't sure that was an improvement. "I don't know," Owen said. He wouldn't lie to him. He'd made that decision the day after Aiden's mother died, when the boy was 4 years old and deserved to grow up, understanding that the world didn't always make clean promises. "But we're going to be okay either way." "I know," Aiden said, and he went back to looking at the waterfall. A man in a gray blazer came out of the elevator bank. Mid-40s, the kind of build that came from a gym membership and a meal plan. He walked like someone who managed problems for a living. "Mr. Brecker." The name came out careful, measured. "I'm Douglas Fenn, head of client relations. I understand you're looking to speak with one of our portfolio directors. Renata Holloway, Ems. Holloway is currently 40 minutes away from executing a property transfer that requires my co-signature under the terms of the Brecker Trust, which was established in 2009 and has been administered by this firm since 2019. Owen kept his voice level. He'd practiced this part. Not the words specifically, but the steadiness behind them, the kind of steady you had to build deliberately when your instinct was to be angry. "I'm not here to cause a disruption. I'm here to do the one thing I've been trying to do for 6 weeks, which is have someone at this firm return a phone call." Fenn's expression shifted in the way that expression shifted when the person behind them had just done a fast recalculation. He glanced at the envelope. "Do you have documentation? Everything you need is in there." Another glance. A decision. "Follow me." They rode the elevator to the 22nd floor. Fenn made small talk about the weather, about the walk from the parking garage, about nothing that mattered. Owen watched the numbers climb and thought about the drive from Elmsdale, which was 2 hours north, and about the garage he'd left in the care of his part-time mechanic, and about the piece of paper in the envelope that he'd spent 3 days tracking down because the law firm managing his late father-in-law's estate had apparently never bothered to register the co-executor clause in their own system. The 22nd floor was quieter than the lobby, darker wood, fewer people, doors that closed completely. Fenn led them to a glass-walled meeting room and gestured for Owen to sit. Aidan climbed into the chair beside him and took out the small notebook he carried everywhere, the one he used for drawing. Owen watched him open it to a blank page and pick up his pencil and settle in the way kids settle when they've learned to wait. "Miss Holloway will be informed that you're here," Fenn said. "The signing is at 4:30, Owen said. "It's 4:07. Fenn left. A woman came in with water and set 2 glasses on the table without speaking. Owen didn't touch his. He looked at the envelope on the table and thought about all the ways the next 20 minutes could go badly. He heard her before he saw her. The click of heels on hardwood that got sharper as it got closer. The way a sound could carry impatience in its rhythm. The door opened and Renata Holloway walked in. And she was everything Owen had expected from a woman who ran the corporate asset division of one of the country's largest financial firms. 50s, dark hair, a suit that probably cost more than Owen's truck. The kind of face that didn't waste expressions. Behind her was a man Owen didn't recognize. Younger, a lawyer by the look of the folder under his arm. Renata stopped when she saw Owen. Her eyes moved the way Fenn's had. Quick, calculating, arriving at a conclusion. "Mr. Brecker." Her voice was the temperature of the meeting room, which was cool. "You've been making quite a bit of noise downstairs." "I've been trying to reach your office for 6 weeks, Owen said. He stood up, not because he was trying to be intimidating, but because he'd been taught to stand when someone entered a room. Old habit. "Mrs. Holloway, the Brecker-Dahl Trust has a co-executor clause that requires my signature for any single asset transfer over $25,000. You're 40 minutes away from transferring a property portfolio worth $52 million to a holding company called Norgate Holdings. I have not been contacted, consulted, or asked to sign anything." Renata looked at the envelope, then at the lawyer beside her, then back at Owen. "The Brecker-Dahl Trust was reviewed by our estate team in 2021, she said. "There was no co-executor on file. There was no co-executor registered in your system," Owen said. "That's a different thing. The original trust document filed with the Ontario Superior Court in 2009 names my late wife and me as co-executors. When she died, that responsibility transferred entirely to me. The clause doesn't expire on death. Your firm's administration failure doesn't nullify a legal instrument." The room was quiet for a moment. Renata turned to the lawyer. He opened the folder, scanned something, and his face did a thing that told Owen he was reading words he hadn't read closely enough before. "Mrs. Holloway," the lawyer said quietly, "I'd like to review this before we proceed. We're 38 minutes from a signed transfer. I understand that. Norgate's counsel is already in the building. I understand that, too." He looked up. "I'd like 10 minutes. Renata's jaw moved. She turned back to Owen and looked at him with an expression that contained, Owen recognized, a specific kind of contempt. Not malicious. Just the reflexive kind. The kind that people developed when they spent enough time in rooms where everyone arrived by car service and couldn't remember the last time they'd stood in a line. "You drove up from..." She glanced at something Fenn must have told her, "from somewhere north of Barrie. With your son. To deliver a document." "I drove up from Elmsdale because your office won't return calls from people who don't have accounts here," Owen said. "My father-in-law built that trust over 40 years. It funds 2 community clinics in rural Grey County that serve people who can't afford to drive 3 hours to a specialist. The Norgate transfer would dissolve the property holdings that generate the income those clinics run on. I've been trying to explain this to someone at this firm since December." Something moved across Renata Holloway's face. Not much. A shift behind the eyes, like something had been placed on a scale that she'd thought was empty. She looked at the lawyer again. He nodded once. "Give me the document," she said. Owen slid the envelope across the table. She took it, looked at the seal, and handed it to the lawyer without opening it herself. He broke the seal and began reading. Renata walked to the window. Outside, the city went about its business in the early February dark, indifferent and enormous. "Daddy," Aiden said softly, not looking up from his drawing. "Yeah, the waterfall downstairs. Does the water go somewhere or does it just loop?" Owen almost smiled. "It loops. That seems wasteful." "It does," Owen said. The lawyer finished reading. He set the document down on the table with a deliberateness that meant something. "The co-executor clause is valid," he said. "The 2009 filing supersedes any administrative record held internally. Mr. Brecker's signature is required." The room went through a change that Owen had been hoping for and had not let himself count on, a stillness that meant something had shifted. Renata turned from the window. She looked at Owen with an expression he didn't quite recognize at first. It took him a moment to understand it was recalibration, the kind that happened when someone who was used to being the most informed person in the room understood they'd been operating with incomplete information. "The Norgate transfer," she said slowly, "will dissolve the primary income-generating assets of a trust that currently funds 2 rural medical clinics and a bursary program for nursing students in communities that don't have much else," Owen said. He wasn't angry. He'd moved past angry around December, somewhere around the 4th unanswered voicemail. What he felt now was just the hard, flat feeling of someone who'd been asking to be heard and had finally found the right door. The buyers know what they're buying. The real estate gets converted to commercial properties. The clinics lose their operating base within 18 months. Renata looked at the document again, at the lawyer, at Owen, who at this firm has been managing the trust since 2019. A man named Clifford Muir. Another pause, longer this time. "Clifford Muir retired in September," the lawyer said. "I know," Owen said. "No one told me. No one updated the account. No one reviewed the trust instruments when the file was transferred. I found out because I called the office in November looking for him, and the receptionist informed me he'd left the firm." Renata was quiet. "The Norgate deal," she said finally. "Who initiated it?" The lawyer looked at his folder. Something in his expression tightened. "The file shows it was initiated internally, recommended to the estate beneficiaries as a divestiture opportunity." "Internally," Renata repeated. Her voice had gone very flat. "Yes." She looked at Owen. It was a different kind of look than the one she'd given him when she walked in. Not warm, exactly, but direct, like she was actually seeing him. "Mr. Brecker," she said, "I owe you an apology." He hadn't expected her to say it that directly. He didn't know what to do with it. "What I want," he said, "is for someone to explain to those clinics that the transfer isn't happening and that the trust is intact." "That's it." She nodded once, decisive. "Douglas." Fenn appeared in the doorway. "Pull Clifford Muir's transition files and have legal up here in 10 minutes. And someone needs to go downstairs and inform Norgate's counsel that today's signing is postponed pending a trust instrument review." Fenn left. The lawyer was already on his phone. Renata turned back to Owen. "This is going to take some time to sort out properly." "I've got time," Owen said. "I've been trying to sort it out since December." She almost smiled. "Not quite. How did you even find the original filing?" "My wife kept paper copies of everything. She was meticulous." He looked at Aiden, who had finished his drawing, and was now examining the glass wall of the meeting room with the same focused interest he gave to anything mechanical. "She passed 4 years ago. I found the copies when I was going through her files last fall, after the trust administrator retired, and I started trying to understand what I'd inherited responsibility for." "Your wife was Elsa Dahl," Renata said. It wasn't a question. She'd been connecting the name. "Elsa Brecker," Owen said. "She took my name." "I see." A pause. "She was Halvard Dahl's daughter. His only child, yes. He built that trust for her work, for the communities she cared about." Owen looked at the window. "He died in 2021. She'd already been gone 2 years by then. He never really recovered." The room was quiet again. Not the tense quiet from before. Something different. "The clinics," Renata said. "How many patients?" "About 400 per month between the 2 of them. Elmsdale has one. And there's another 140 kilometers north in a place called Kessler's Mill. Most of the people using them would otherwise have to drive 2.5 to 3 hours one way to see a general practitioner. A lot of them are elderly. A lot of them have no car." Owen stopped. He hadn't meant to say all of that. It came out because it was true, and he'd been carrying it around for months. Elsa spent 6 years advocating for those clinics. She helped design the funding model. It was her life's work, more than anything else. Renata said nothing, but she was listening. "I'm not asking for anything special," Owen said. "I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for the thing I was legally entitled to all along, which is to be included in decisions that affect a trust I co-execute. That's it." The door opened and 3 people came in, 2 lawyers and someone from the financial team, all of them carrying folders, and the slightly rattled look of people who'd been pulled from other tasks. The next 2 hours were not simple. Owen sat at one end of the table while lawyers traded documents and made calls and ran searches and established, piece by piece, that the co-executor clause was exactly what it said it was, that the 2009 filing was legally binding, that the Norgate transfer could not proceed without Owen's signature, that the internal recommendation to sell had been generated by Clifford Muir 9 months before his retirement, passed along to beneficiaries who hadn't known to question it, and carried forward by administrative momentum alone. Aidan sat through most of it drawing. At one point, he fell asleep in his chair with his head on his jacket, and one of the lawyers found a conference room blanket and draped it over him without being asked, which was the kindest thing Owen saw happen in that building all day. At 6:15, Renata came back into the room alone. "Norgate has been informed that the transaction is suspended pending a trust review," she said. "Our internal compliance team has opened an investigation into how this recommendation was made and why the co-executor clause wasn't flagged." She sat down. "I want to be clear that this firm should have caught this. The failure is ours. Clifford Muir will be contacted, and depending on what we find, there may be a regulatory referral." Owen nodded. "The trust assets are frozen as of this afternoon," she continued. "Nothing moves without both your authorization and a full instrument review, which we're initiating immediately. We should have preliminary findings within 2 weeks. The clinics," Owen said. "The operating transfers will continue uninterrupted. That's the first thing I made sure of." She paused. "They won't miss a payroll." He let out a breath he'd been holding for so long he'd forgotten it was there. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me for doing what we should have done in December." Her voice was dry, but there was something underneath it, some honest version of the statement. She glanced at Aidan, still asleep under the conference blanket. "He's a good traveler. He's a good kid," Owen said. She looked at him for a moment, the way people sometimes looked at other people when they were trying to find the right word for something. "Your wife," she said finally. "She must have been something." Owen didn't answer right away. He thought about Elsa, who had kept paper copies of everything and driven rural backroads in January to make sure the clinics were stocked, and had once argued a funding committee into reversing a decision by sitting in their waiting room every morning for 9 days until they agreed to meet with her, who had taught him that showing up was not the same as making noise, that sometimes showing up was just the quiet, persistent fact of being present, until the people who needed to stop ignoring you ran out of reasons to keep doing it. "She was," he said. He woke Aidan gently. The boy surfaced slowly, the way he always did, taking stock of where he was before he moved. He looked at the empty table, at the retreating back of a lawyer, at his father. "Is it done?" Aidan said. "It's done." Aidan sat up and rubbed his eye with the heel of his hand. "Did they say sorry?" "One of them did. Was it the one who looked like she was in charge?" Owen almost smiled. "Yeah, good." Aidan retrieved his notebook from under the blanket and tucked it into his bag. "Can we get dinner on the highway? The place with the chicken?" "Sure," Owen said. They took the elevator down. In the lobby, the waterfall was still running, the same water cycling in its closed loop. Aidan stopped and looked at it for a moment on the way out. "Still wasteful," he said. They pushed through the doors and out into the February night, which was cold and clear and smelled like snow coming. Owen's truck was 2 blocks over. He could feel the tiredness in his knees, the specific kind that came from sitting in the wrong kind of chair for too long. His phone had 14 messages, none of which he was going to look at until morning. Aidan walked beside him, their breath coming in small white clouds. "Dad," Aidan said. "Yeah, why did you bring me? You could have left me at Kyle's." Owen had thought about this. He'd thought about it the night before, when he was packing the envelope and making the drive arrangements and deciding whether to tell Aidan what they were doing. He could have left him. Mrs. Garland next door would have taken him, or Kyle's parents, who'd offered. "Because whatever happened today, I wanted you to see it," Owen said. "I didn't want to have to explain it to you later. I wanted you to be there." Aidan was quiet for half a block. What if it had gone bad, he said. Like if security had come, then you would have seen that too. You'd have seen that sometimes things go bad and you still have to try. Owen glanced down at him. You remember what Mum used to say about the water pump in the old Corolla? You have to prime it before you give up on it, Aidan said. The phrase came out already memorized. Right. Owen nodded. Today was the priming. They reached the truck. Owen unlocked it, and Aidan climbed in and immediately found the granola bar Owen had left on the seat for him. The heat kicked in slowly, the way it always did in cold weather. Owen pulled out onto the street and headed for the highway ramp. His phone buzzed on the console. A number he didn't recognize, then a voicemail notification. He let it go. He thought about what Renata Holloway had said. The apology, which had been real even if it had been late. The way she'd looked when the lawyer told her the recommendation had come from within the firm. A look that Owen had read as someone understanding they'd trusted a process that didn't deserve to be trusted. He thought about Elsa's paper copies, stacked neatly in the filing cabinet in her office, which was now the room where Aidan did his homework. He hadn't been able to touch most of her things for 2 years after she died. When he finally had, he'd found them organized the way she'd organized everything, with tabs and dates, and the kind of foresight that had always made her better at the long game than he was. He'd found the trust documents in December, 4 years after she died, because he'd finally opened the cabinet. He thought about what it meant that she'd kept them, that she'd known, maybe, that there would come a time when having the paper version would matter, that she'd prepared for a future she didn't know she wouldn't be in. Dad, Aidan said. Yeah, the drawing I did today. He held up the notebook. In the dim light of the highway, Owen could just make out a sketch of the lobby waterfall, rendered in pencil with more accuracy than most adults would have managed. Do you think Mum would have liked it? Owen's throat did the thing it did sometimes, the clench that came without warning and passed the same way. Yeah, he said. She would have loved it. Aidan looked at the drawing for a moment longer, then closed the notebook and set it in his lap and looked out the window at the dark fields going past on either side of the highway. They drove north. The snow, when it came softly, the way good things sometimes did, without announcement, without drama, just suddenly there, covering the road ahead in something that looked, in the headlights, almost like a clean start. 2 weeks later, Owen got a letter from Carrington Ridgemont. The trust review had been completed. The Norgate recommendation had been rescinded. A preliminary compliance finding indicated that Clifford Muir had held an undisclosed financial relationship with an entity connected to Norgate Holdings. A referral had been made to the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. The clinics were not mentioned in the letter. They didn't need to be. Owen already knew they were still open. He'd been up the week before to replace the water heater in the Elmsdale location, which had given out in January, and which the clinic manager had mentioned apologetically when he stopped by. He'd had the part in his truck. It took him 40 minutes. He was back at the garage by noon. There was a card on his workbench when he got in. Aidan had left it before school. In the efficient and slightly formal way, Aidan did things he cared about. It was a drawing of 2 figures, a tall one and a small one, standing in front of a building that Owen recognized as the Carrington Ridgemont lobby, because of the waterfall he'd rendered in the background with the same architectural precision as the drawing from February. Underneath, in Aidan's careful print, were 3 words, "We did it." Owen set it against the wall where he could see it from the lift. Then he pulled on his work gloves and went out to meet the day.